This is iFanboy Pick of the Week 913, brought to you by iFanboy listeners just like you. My name is Connor Kilpatrick, and sitting in for my co-host Josh Flanagan is Dr. Ryan Haupt.
Hello. Nothing in this podcast can be construed as medical advice.
And welcome back to iFanboy Pick of the Week episode. This is episode 913. And Ryan, welcome back to the show. Happy New Year.
Thank you. Happy New Year holidays to you as well. Yeah.
We meant to get you on earlier, but the scheduling thing had to flip-flop, and now here we are, right at the beginning of February. So, welcome back. Happy to have you here. Every week, one of us reads all their comics, and they pick their favorite book from the stack. I call it the Pick of the Week. We talk about that book, the rest of the books from the week, the Patron Pick, listener mail, and here are your spoiler warnings. This is your blanket spoiler warning for the episode. There'll be some, probably, so exercise some caution. This week, Ryan, you had to pick, and it was a fifth week. Despite the fact that last week's fourth week felt like a fifth week, they were both very similar. I'm sorry.
Does the audience know exactly what a fifth week means? Are there people out there that need the concept of a comic book fifth week?
I assume. I don't know.
Comics we can point them to?
Well, I mean, comics were on a monthly schedule at one point, and there were 4 weeks in a month. And every once in a while, because of, I don't know, math, there's a fifth week. And usually that's when, like, the straggling books come out. Like, the books, there's just, like, it's usually a really small week. And
a lot of annuals.
In the fifth week. Yeah. It hasn't really changed that much even now that comics are on, like, a double bi-weekly schedule. It's still, the fifth week is usually pretty light and pretty dark. Pretty, I don't say bleak, but it could be rough. How did you have it?
Yeah, and so I wasn't super encouraged by my stack. I would say, there were a couple of books I was looking forward to, and the books I was looking forward to ended up being the ones that were in contention for Pick of the Week. And the pick this time went to Duke number 2, part of the Energon universe. Story by Joshua Williamson, art by Tom Riley, colors by Jordi Belair, and letters by Russ Wooten.
Before we jump in, it's important to note that we are officially changing this to G.I. Joe of the Week. But, have we ever talked about your G.I. Joe or non-G.I. Joe?
Not really, because I'm a little younger than you.
Slightly less, just slightly younger.
Right. So I think what we have talked about before is the sort of temporal overlap where you and Josh seem to straddle the G.I. Joe to Ninja Turtles.
Right. Yes.
Realm. I straddled the Ninja Turtles to Power Rangers realm.
Correct. You're one standard deviation away from G.I. Joe.
Yes.
And so
I did watch the cartoon some growing up, but I never read any of the comics or anything like that growing up, and I would not call myself a G.I. Joe super fan, or even a fan.
But but you've been reading the Energon books, or at least Transformers was. Have you read did you read Cobra Commander? I assume you read Duke number 1.
I did read Duke number 1, just because I was interested enough in the concept and the creative team, and I thought we talked about that moment in the first Transformers book where the pilot gets slapped by, was it Starscream or one of the flying Decepticons, and I was so taken aback by that moment. And then when there was a little Easter egg that the guy who was his riding with him was Duke, I was like, okay, I'm in. That sounds cool. And I read the first issue, and I really liked, sort of rogue soldier man on the run. This is, again, I'm not like as familiar with Duke as a character, but this feels like a bit of a new interpretation of the G.I. Joe characters. And I don't know, this book, this issue in particular, Duke's on the run from the government. He goes to his buddy Clutch, who's supposed to be able to, build him a car and get him out of a jam. And Clutch has got like a sexy girl and he can't remember her name. And he pulls the slugs out, and then they get attacked. And there's like a great car chase sequence. And the Energon books, both Transformers and Void Rivals and this one, the action choreography, I feel like, is so reinvigorated from what we normally get in comics. And I just find these panels propulsive in what's happening and how exciting they are. And I just had a ton of fun reading this, even though I'm not as familiar with the characters and what they're building.
Yeah, this book is terrific. I mean, this was my pick of the week easily, even though there were some very good books this week, even on a light week. But Duke number 1 over the holiday break that we didn't get to talk about was amazing. This was really good. It's funny, it's called Duke. I mean, Duke's the main character, but as we're unfolding into this issue, and it is a miniseries. These are just 6-issue minis. This is G.I. Joe. There isn't a Energon G.I. Joe book. G.I. Joe Real American Hero takes place in a different continuity. This feels like the G.I. Joe book that they could have just called G.I. Joe. As we add, so in the first issue, it was just Duke and Hawk, I believe. It's been a while. And then this issue, we had Duke and Hawk, but then we added in Clutch. We added in Roadblock and Stalker, who were brought in by Hawk to subdue Duke, who is, as you said, on the run and rogue. No one believes him that a robot killed his buddy. He's sort of become a fringe lunatic. He goes to like a conspiracy theory gathering.
He's like a Fox Mulder type.
Yeah, almost. In the last issue, no one believes that there's giant robots, and so he's on the run from the government. I don't believe so. I could be wrong. I could totally be wrong, but I don't think G.I. Joe is a thing yet in this story. So when he's captured, he's taken to the pit, which is, as we all know, is the G.I. Joe base, but is a decommissioned former base. It has been decommissioned since the 80s, which is a nice little
yeah, I
joke.
like that. And that was also getting a cutaway. When I got the cutaway of the base, I was like, oh, that's a tick in the column. That was terrific. Winning.
And then he gets thrown in prison in the brig in the base by Stalker and Rock and Roll. They leave him behind, only to find that in the cell across the way or next to him, I can't tell which, is the Baroness. And but by the time I got to that page, I was like, awesome. Now, it's important to note, I've never really liked Duke as a character. He's never been amongst my favorite G.I. Joes. I mean, he's a Joe, so I respect him, obviously. But he's sort of the fuddy-duddy. In the previous incarnations, not this one, he's sort of the fuddy-duddy. He's the Cyclops of the team.
The Leonardo. Can we keep it in the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles realm for my hot sake, please?
Even as a kid, I always resented the fact that on the cartoon he took Snake Eyes' storylines. He took Snake Eyes' girlfriend. You know, they made Duke this the blonde-haired, blue-eyed Duke the hero of the team in the cartoon. Where in the comics it was Snake Eyes, who's also blonde-haired and blue-eyed. But he was just always kind of boring, you know. Yes. He was the leader who was always reprimanding people for doing things. So I wasn't super psyched when they announced Duke as one of the books. But as you said, this is sort of a rougher Duke. He's like the super soldier of the army, right? He's like the best soldier. He can do it all. But when he goes rogue and when he starts espousing that there's giant robots out to kill us, you know, he falls out of favor, and subduing him is very difficult. I thought this was great, and this Duke is incredibly fun. It's a little unclear why everyone has nicknames. If there's no G.I. Joe, why is Clutch called Clutch, even though he's got, you know, a name? Why is Rock and Roll called Rock? Like, it doesn't really matter, but I always thought those were their G.I. Joe names, not just nicknames everyone has. But it also doesn't really matter ultimately. And the Tom Riley art is really terrific.
It's really strong. Good. Yeah,
I don't think I've seen Tom Riley before, but the Jordi Belaire's colors are great. They're nice and flat. There's a nice color palette where it's a lot in this issue, especially there's a lot of browns because they're in Clutch's junkyard and they're running around with army fatigues. But every once in a while, there's pops of color that really draw your eye to the action. Tom Riley's terrific. It's kind of cartoony, kind of realistic. Mm-hmm. It sort of lives in that middle ground. I mean, it's becoming a cliche on the show, but these Energon books and the G.I. Joe book, which it's not part of Energon, but still I'm calling it part of the whole the same thing, has really reignited my love of G.I. Joe, Josh's love of G.I. Joe. These are my favorite books.
It reminds me a lot of it reminds me of the art in the I Hate This Place book, the Kyle Starks series.
It's a little less cartoony than that.
It's a little less, but I think that's appropriate. Like, I think it you know, pushes it a little bit in the more straight and narrow in a way that an army book feels appropriate, but like still has really dynamic, you know, well defined figures and dynamic movement and action and just solid storytelling.
But you're right. I'm looking through the middle part. So Rock and Roll shows up. Duke and Clutch are at Clutch's.
Maybe it's just because Rock and Roll looks like Dante Howitzer that I'm making that connection.
You know, so Duke and Clutch he's hiding out at Clutch's garage, and Rock and Roll shows up, and there's just this great splash page of him firing off his M60, and it's just and with the boom 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 in the background, the handwritten sound effects, like it's just a wonderful looking book. And as a Joe fan, it's incredibly fun. I'm curious what they're going to do overall because, like I said, these are just miniseries, both this and Cobra Commander. So does that mean there's going to be like a series of minis telling the story, which is totally fine? Or is there going to eventually be a G.I. Joe book after this is all established? I'm very curious to see how this goes moving forward. But this seems to be quite popular. I just saw that Void Rivals is in its 5th printing now. So
wow, that's incredible.
These books seem to be hitting a button in the zeitgeist, and so I don't want them to expand too quickly. I don't want them to lose the quality that they've got going. But I would like to. It would be interesting to see how they're going to move forward with a ongoing G.I. Joe series, if that's the plan, or if it's just going to be a series of character minis, which is, whatever. Cool.
And it's all relatively, it's not new. Like, I know the characters, but this does feel like a breath of fresh air relative to what I had. Well,
it's also, I guess, a testament to the quality if you're loving it too.
Yeah.
And you're not like me and Josh who have this ingrained in you. I mean, right now, geez, we're so deep in it. I've got volume 3 of the classic G.I. Joe on my nightstand right now. I'm flying through the original series. Josh is doing that and watching the original cartoon, and we're reading this. I'm G.I. Joe up to my eyeballs right now.
I think what this means. Go ahead.
No, I'm just saying if you're also enjoying it, that just means I think it's a really solid and good comic book. All these books are.
Which I think means that when I tell you and Josh that the Power Rangers book really is pretty good, I mean, you gotta take my word. I think you gotta try it. You gotta take my word for it.
Yeah, I mean, maybe. Anything's possible, Ryan.
Thank you. I'll take that.
But so, did you read Cobra Commander, or you just read Duke?
I have not. It's on my digital stack, but no, I didn't get to it yet.
Curious.
Is it good?
It's hard to say because my problem with it was more about the fandom aspect than the quality of the actual work. So
okay, interesting.
I think you will like it because it's well made and the art's really good. But my problem with it just explores an area of G.I. Joe I always disliked, and so I was hoping they wouldn't make an appearance in this world, but it did, and that's fine. They're not made for me, as much as it feels like it. I think, like I said, that was also my pick of the week. But if it was the close runner-up, if I had the pick, would have been Alan Scott, the Green Lantern #4. I think this is quietly maybe DC's best comic.
It's really good.
Or if not, it's certainly in the top discussion. And it's a miniseries, so it's only one issue left. But they put out a bunch of Justice Society minis together. They did Alan Scott, they did Jay Garrick, and they did what's his name, the Sandman one we love. What is his name?
Wesley Dodds.
Wesley Dodds is terrific, really good. Jay Garrick, not so great, but Alan Scott has been wonderfully emotional. It's written by Tim Sheridan with art by Kyan Tormey, and it's exploring a superhero deeply in the closet in the 1940s and what that means. And then the big twist has been that his new nemesis was his boyfriend who was also
a deep cover,
who wasn't
Russian
really
spy.
Even his boyfriend. Well, kind of was, but he was a Russian. It was revealed this issue, Russian spy who was specifically sent to infiltrate and seduce him to get, because he was in charge of this project to harness the red fucking flame energy or whatever. But this whole series has been terrific. We've talked about it almost every issue. And one of them, I think, was pick of the week, or should have been. I don't remember if it was. My brain is mush. But amazing. Tell me what you think about it, because I think this is a terrific comic.
I haven't gotten a chance to talk about it on the show yet. It's I think it's really strong. I really like how it's doing a golden age superhero story, but with a modern sensibility where Alan Scott is closeted, but very clearly is aware that he himself is gay and is dealing with trans people and trying to feels authentically written as like a 1940s person struggling with the concept of pronouns, but trying to be kind about it rather than judgmental. And, I thought issue 3 with the Spectre, where the Spectre kind of gives him his perspective as somebody who talks directly to God of just like, I don't know why all these religious people think who you are in this way matters. So it's a little heavy-handed, and I could see people pushing back against that, but I think it actually really works for when this story is set and who the characters are and what it's about. And then I kind of I thought I wouldn't like it. I thought I would groan at the idea of like, okay, Jeff Johns created a bunch of other colored Lantern Corps.
Yeah.
and now we're kind of doing that with the Alan Scott Green Lantern world. But they built it up in such a way where I'm just like, yeah, this makes sense. This works. I'm in. I'm digging it. It's cool.
I think you're 100% right. When I initially saw what they were doing, I was like, oh, they're going to give him a Red Lantern? Like, that's weird. But that's almost secondary to the emotional betrayal, right? So, like, he's the Red Lantern and he's got the red flame and he's a Russian. There's a lot of on the nose stuff there, but it's also this guy that Alan is deeply in love with at a time when he couldn't do that publicly, and it was such a lifeline for him. And there's a wonderful scene here where this is the issue where the bad guy lays out, this is what's been going on the whole time. This is who I am. This has been the plot. And it's it's a standard comic book trope. But there's a layer of emotion to it because these guys, or at least they were in love ostensibly, one of them for sure. The other one, we don't sure. But then there's he's got Alan trapped in this red bubble. And there's a great scene where they're leaning against it. Alan's got his back to him. He's leaning against it. So the other guy turns around and leans against him. And they have a wonderful sort of heart-to-heart. And, you can see the, what is his name? The Red Lantern cracking.
John Ladd.
Right. Maybe I was actually in love. And
that was his deep cover name, but yeah.
Right. And there's a wonderful moment where Alan talks about how he bought the house and he used to go off to, and he's like, wow, you hated that house. And that's the moment where he cracked, right? Like it wasn't all deep cover.
Mm-hmm.
And then, but Alan uses that as a way to, to break through the red bubble and, attack it. It just was a really well done issue and on top of a really well done series. This has been terrific. I don't know what their plans for the Justice Society are. The main Jeff Johns book keeps getting later and later and later. But I would love for them to keep exploring the Justice Society. I don't know how these sell. I don't know how popular they are.
And the cliffhanger at the end of this issue is Alan uses the Red Lantern to power up his ring. So now he's got a Green Lantern ring powered up by a Red Lantern. And what does that mean?
Right. He was out of juice. That's why he was trapped. Which he shouldn't have the costume anymore, but whatever. Nothing makes sense. Doesn't matter. But this book and Sandman, there's obviously there's something there with the Justice Society. They're terrific characters, but there's got to be a way we can get the ongoing, and I'd say ongoing golden age adventures of the Justice Society. Don't need to bring them forward. Just tell a story in the 40s of these guys, all young guys and women, figuring it out, becoming heroes, becoming the templates for everybody else. Like I'd love to see a golden age book, with this version of Alan Scott and him, becoming buddies with Jay Garrick and bring in Wesley Dott. Like let's just do it. Come on. Like, let's get a miniseries going. If it's popular, let's make it an ongoing. Like, I just think there's so much here.
How do you think you'd do in a deep cover situation where you had to be in a relationship with somebody? Could you keep your world separate, or would you fall in love?
Isn't that the classic question for every deep cover agent and every piece of fiction? Like,
I know. That's what I'm asking.
I'm sure it's very difficult. But I guess it depends on what kind of a fanatic I am. So you're basically asking me if I'm a Kerry Russell or I'm a Matthew Reese from The Americans, because they both handle it very differently.
Mm-hmm. And then ironically got married in real life.
I think it's interesting because it's so difficult, right? If he just was like, you were just a mission for me, then that's one thing. But adding in the wrinkle of him having those feelings, because again, if he's not gay, he's at least bi in the 40s.
Well, they hinted him being gay when he's rising through the ranks of the Russian army.
If not gay, then opportunistically
willing to sleep with a man to get ahead.
Right. So they don't make it clear, but there's lots of ways you can take it, and so that makes it interesting too. I just think this has been terrific. It's been out of nowhere, and I'm hoping people are checking it out because it's really good.
I agree.
Last issue's pick of the week, or 2 weeks ago's pick of the week, was Avengers Twilight Book 1. This is Book 2. It's coming out on a bi-weekly schedule, so this is going to be done pretty quick. Book 2, Zdarsky and Acuna. What have you thought of this so far?
I really liked the first book. I've always been a fan of the sort of, I don't want to say fully nihilistic, but like the sort of future story where the heroes are maybe one generation removed from their prime and can see that their efforts didn't work out, and now what do? Right. Similar to like Earth X and Kingdom Come. So this is sort of plugging. Yeah, so this is sort of scratching that itch. I like Chip Zdarsky's sensibility being brought here. because he's good at the the big Marvel stuff. He's good at writing the fascist regime. And then I liked that in the middle there's a moment where Steve Rogers gets to give the big speech, right? And the plan hasn't gone perfectly, but they've been able to break through the fascistic news controlled media, and Steve gets to talk to the people again. And he gives this rousing speech, and nothing happens because a rousing speech is not good enough to break through how messed up the world is right now.
It also wasn't a very good rousing speech.
No, it wasn't. And I thought that while I was reading it, I was like, this is not like the best I've seen of the Steve rousing speech. And then the fact that it wasn't. It didn't work out. I was like, oh man.
Yeah, I'm glad it didn't because as it was happening, I was like, this isn't going to work because this is not a very good speech. And also, I thought they were going to show evidence. Like you're just going to say, Steve's just going to go on the airways and say, hey, your government and your media are controlling you. Come with me and break free. And I was like, that's it? That's not going to work. And it didn't. So I'm glad they didn't have it work because it wasn't enough. I think this is really fun. I like the first issue a hell of a lot. This issue slightly less, but still enjoyed it. He goes to Kamala Khan and says, help, join the Defenders, who was them calling themselves the underground team with Luke Cage. And she says, I got a family, I got kids, I can't be doing this. And she shuns him, which is now spoiled by the next issue cover. Which shows
the cover kind of made it clear that that's not.
I like that a lot. I don't know why they call Hero Day the day everyone died.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm wondering hopefully there's some explanation as to why that is being used.
We learned that the bad guys, the ultimate bad guys that are trying to keep the heroes from coming back in the world and are manipulating Tony Stark's and Janet Van Dyne's son, are Red Skull and Ultron. Right.
So we met Jarvis's son earlier, who was the butler of Tony. Not Tony. Tony's son, whatever his name is. But turns out he's not actually
James Stark.
He's not actually Jarvis's son. He's actually Red Skull in disguise. His disguise, by the way, looks a hell of a lot like Jim Steranko.
Yeah, I can see that.
But there, you see them in the White House, basically running the country. They're telling the president what to do in terms of how to deal with Captain America.
I liked that scene. That was fun.
The president's merely a figurehead for this guy, Jarvis, who's running things, and they have this figurehead sort of almost like a ecstatic style Avengers team that does missions for publicity to keep the people in line, but doesn't actually do any good in the world. And so that's what they're up against. And Steve, who has a very, very big jaw in this book, just the rousing speech doesn't work. And so he's going to have to figure a different way to do this to save the day because it's not going to happen. But he doesn't even know. He doesn't even know that it's Red Skull. That's going to be even worse.
Yeah. I feel like Steve needs a haircut, too.
Steve looks like he needs a bath.
Yep. But maybe not even a haircut. It just needs to be styled a little better. I know it's under a helmet sometimes, but it's just... I
did wonder because in the last issue they got him a new super soldier serum. They sort of concocted one and he's got it back now. And I was finding myself wondering how that works. Because he's like, I still got a trick knee. It's like, well, shouldn't the trick knee not be a trick knee anymore if he's got super soldier serum in him? And it either works or it doesn't, right? I'm sure.
That was I remember when I remember when they were doing the Falcon and the Winter Soldier show on Disney Plus, and there was a thing they mentioned about how they fixed the super soldier serum, so now that when you take it, you're not jacked, because obviously not every actor in that show could end up looking like Chris Evans and Sebastian Stan. And I was like, wait, how is that fixing it? Because if I take a super soldier serum, I want to look jacked. I don't want to look like myself anymore.
Right. I'd like some abs, please.
Yes, thank you.
I just, I figure young Steve had lots of physical ailments that the super soldier serum fixed. So I feel like it should also fix his bad knee and other things. Maybe give him all of his hair back. But
I mean, if Dark Knight Rises taught us anything, it's that you get the right knee brace, you can kick through bricks. So,
God, that movie. So enjoyable, not as good as issue 1, but enjoyable. And we're a third of the way through the story now. So that's the only problem with these short-ish stories like this, right? You have to really kind of fly through the plot because...
Yeah, I feel like this type of world building that Zdarsky is doing here would benefit from a longer, I think an 8, 10, maybe even 12.
I think 12. Yeah. 12 is the right... If this is a big prestige story, Zdarsky and Dan Cunha hasn't done art in forever, do 12 and really sort of let's learn about this world. But with 6, you really got to move quick. And so it's a bummer, but that's fine. So there you go. Let's take a quick moment to thank everyone who supports the show. We are listener supported. We are only able to do all these shows that we do. We do at least 6 a month because of you, the listener. And we thank everyone who does that. We appreciate everyone who thinks that, hey, I'm enjoying this show enough, or I enjoy all these shows enough. They make my comic book life more fun, my general life more fun, and they deserve my support. We thank everyone who thinks that way. And it could be, you don't have to even do any of these things. You can just we'll tell you at the end. So patreon.com/iFanboy is the main way of supporting us. We got lots of great patrons. They hopefully get lots of great things out of being a patron, other than just supporting the show. They get to be part of a great community on Discord and Facebook. There's the monthly patron hangout that we do. And they get all kinds of great exclusive merchandise depending on their tier of support. And we thank them very much. iFanboy.threadless.com is our t-shirt store. You can get those designs and all kinds of things, not just t-shirts, but we mainly are on t-shirts. 13 different designs. You can find it there. iFanboy.com/support is our PayPal tip jar, that's where you can go. If you feel like the show is a lot of fun, you want to support it, but you don't want to be a patron, you don't want to buy a t-shirt, that's where you can go. You can drop in $1 or $2 to say thanks. We appreciate that. iFanboy.com/Amazon is our shopping page. That's where you can find a general shopping link for Amazon. You can also find links to our Booksplode books. We get a piece of all those sales. It doesn't come out of your pocket, it comes out of Amazon. So we thank you very much. And bookshop.org is our partner to help support local bookstores. If you order books through Bookshop, then they will be fulfilled by local bookstores, which are the lifeline in the heart of the country. And we thank everyone. If you can only support in one way or no way, however you do can help us, we appreciate that. We are here because of you. We thank you very much. Let's move on to another book I think is one of the best books coming out, but doesn't get talked about a lot.
Yeah, Local Man #9, created and written by Tony Fleeks and Tim Seeley, who also trade off art duties. So Tony Fleeks does the art in the modern day, and Tim Seeley does the art in the 90s style, but is actually kind of expanded to doing other kinds of comic book styles. It's just been fascinating. This book, I don't know that it's quite ready to go to the rarefied era of Astro City, but it's building to that level of its own sort of fleshed out, well thought through comic book superhero universe.
Yeah. I wouldn't. There's hardly any books that are in that era, but it's way more interesting than the initial plot suggested it would be, which is this character from the 90s, sort of extreme era of Image, goes back home, is a washout. He's lost the ability to use his identity, so he goes and he helps fight crime in his tiny town in a ski mask, and he still has his powers. And you think that was initially the sort of the pitch of the book, right? And then it sort of expanded. There's been murders. There's a conspiracy. He's uncovered. The person behind it was shocking and surprising. And he got dosed. It's kind of over by this book, but in the previous arc, he got dosed with LSD by some hippies in a commune without realizing it. And so he thought he had this crazy vision quest where he was, I don't know, I thought it was one of the more convincing portrayals of a high person in comics. And he's bumping into the panel boundaries and he's seeing his own thought balloons. It was really well done. And then something that this book is doing, he's sort of a Hawkeye type, but with a cap shield where he has really good aim, he never misses. And so he's realizing he can use his powers in kind of interesting ways because if he never misses, then even if he doesn't know exactly where he's aiming, he should still hit his target. And so he's able to find solutions to problems in interesting ways using his power like that, which is interesting to watch blossom, and I think is blossoming in part because he got really high. But then the team that he was a part of... He's almost like Karnak plus Hawkeye, right?
A little bit, yeah.
He kind of... he gets arrested. He has to escape from jail. He sort of sees how he can get the keys.
Sees the flaw.
Yeah, it's not exactly like that, but it's almost like he, hitting his target is a wider thing than just throwing a pencil. So it was. I thought it was interesting. It's just a lot deeper of a story than
it is. A lot deeper of a story, and the team that he was on when he was a younger man before getting promoted to the big leagues, they were sort of introduced as just sort of a generic '90s hardcore teen team, And what you realize is that each of their powers, if leveraged by a greedy corporation, could be profitable. So, like, there's a person who can generate flame, and they can use that for heating and cooling. There's a person who can control water; they can use that for hydroelectric dams. There's a person who can just produce like slime and jelly, and they're slippery, and you can make petroleum products. And like, so realizing that the way they built this team out all have there's economic value in that team beyond just saving the world. I thought was like, well, that's in the words of Butcher, that's diabolical.
And I think one of the fun things with the book is that, as you said earlier, the flashback second part where Tim Seeley draws it, where you see the original team back in the sort of an early 90s style, but it always gives context and flavor to what's happening in the main story. I think this is a really good book. It's very much on the radar.
Charles Byrne Black Hole style to start that transitions into the 90s.
Yeah, it was interesting. I think I'm always excited. I read it in a lark originally because I like Tim Seeley's work. Not always, but I always think it's interesting. And I picked it up and I thought, oh, that's pretty good. And it's gotten better with each issue. I think right now, at this point now, it's just created this really interesting story that's happening.
And if you were thinking about getting caught up on it, I believe this issue is the last one of the arc and they're going to take a short break. So now would be a good time to get caught up.
Well, that's good. All right, so I'm really enjoying Batman Offworld. This is Jason Aaron's Batman miniseries with Doug Mahnke's art. And, I love Batman I think you and I keep talking about the same books, but I think you and I talked about Offworld. But I love Batman in a sci-fi setting, having to survive.
We talked about it. Yeah, we did talk about issue 1 together.
Not being able to fall back on his usual tricks. Having a Temerian sort of love interest who can't crack through that Batman shell.
Which I couldn't help but laugh at the retcon. So it's like, okay, so now it's Dick and Bruce both had little Temerian flings?
I guess so. But I just think it's incredibly fun. I mean, Mahnke is an artist I've always liked, but he really gets to go all out with all these aliens. Batman's constantly having to fight. Because first he started off on sort of like this, gladiatorial planet, but now he's on the run from all these crazy looking aliens, and it's just been really fun. He had to craft himself a new costume because his old one got destroyed, and he's got this badass Temerian sidekick who is helping him. But
now he's got a badass Space Wolf sidekick.
Yeah, he tamed a Space Wolf. It's just, I think this is great. I mean, I talked about this in Action Comics before. How Jason Aaron's doing a lot of fun things right now. He feels like he's in his fuck it, period. They announced he was doing Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I've heard there's another book that's also in that vein that they haven't announced yet. And he just seems to be doing what he wants to do and having fun doing it. And this is a really great, fun little miniseries. It's sort of out of continuity. You don't have to worry about it. And I like it quite a bit.
Me too.
So the next book we're going to talk about is sort of a bonus patron pick. So this wasn't the patron pick, but many of the patrons in the Discord, a couple of them actually, but one in particular, really was curious about this book and didn't know because it's a $7 like 60-page book. I didn't know if they wanted to drop $7 on a book, so he was hoping we would talk about it. And so I read it, and I'll let you know. This is some Oni Press called Jill and the Killers, #1. It's a crime book. It's about a bunch of high school girls solving a murder, and it's pretty bad. So that's your warning for this $7 book. The art's okay. The overall story is okay. There are some clever and fun bits they do here, but for the most part, the main character is annoying. One of the other girls speaks like a medieval knight for some reason all the time. That's really annoying. Things seem to happen with no connective tissue. It's almost like there's a bunch of story beats. They just wrote them out without thinking about how the beats should work together. And this is not a problem that is just this book. I see this in a lot of new TV shows where they just sort of things happen very quickly. I don't know if they worry about everybody's attention span or what, but there seems to be no connective tissue anymore to a lot of stories I'm seeing. But it just was kind of a bummer because the main character who we spend all of our time with is so just mind-numbingly awful and annoying, and then her friend who also speaks like a knight is annoying, and then the things just sort of happen. Also, it was really distracting. The coloring by Warnia K. Sahawati. That's not right. Sahadui and Rebecca Nalty is distracting because for some reason they color the main character as if she's a Tamarian. She's got gold skin and almost red hair, which does not match her father at all. And I don't know why they gave her that color scheme, but it was very, very distracting. And I don't know. I was looking forward to it because it was a crime book, but man, this just may not be for me, which is fine. But it just wasn't. I just think not a lot of fun.
That's too bad.
Yeah, it's a bummer. So there you have it. Those are the comics we're going to talk about in a very light week. But as always, we have the Patron Pick, patreon.com/iFanboy. Every patron gets a vote out of the book to the rundown. And this week, the winner was Moon Man, #1 from Image Comics, written by Scott Kid Cootie Muscudi and Kyle Higgins, art by Marco Licati, colors by Igor Monti, and letters by Hassan Otsmane Allahu. And again, Ryan, last time we talked, we had The Holy Roller, which was very much a pitch book for Andy Samberg. And this appears to be a pitch book for Kid Cudi, as he is the main character in the book. Just
Do you like Kid Cudi?
I know nothing about him other than he was in the Bill and Ted movie over the. I know he's a rapper. I don't know anything about him, but the main character.
He was in X, that I think it's A24 sort of slasher porno horror movie set in the 70s of Texas.
He's an actor, musician. But he looks exactly like the main character, and the main character has his middle name as a name, so it's clearly him. And I don't have a problem with that. Like I'm just pointing it out that the last time you and I talked, we had a very similar book in The Holy Roller.
Yeah.
So the only thing that matters is whether or not the comic's good at the end of the day. And Kid Cudi, from the little thing in the back, said he is a longtime comic fan, so that's also makes sense. But
he seems like a cool guy. Like I've seen him a lot of stuff. He did a guest spot on Brooklyn Nine-Nine. He was on Comedy Bang Bang for a while. Like I've seen him in various capacities, and I actually generally enjoy what he's doing. I will admit before we start discussing this that I have one of, like, I don't know if you have this, Connor, where there are like hyper specific subgenres that you always are drawn to.
Okay.
And one of my hyper specific subgenres is a lonely astronaut story. I love it when astronauts are lonely.
Right.
Don't know why, but that's kind of what I went into this sort of hoping we were getting a Kid Cudi inspired lonely astronaut story. And this wasn't quite what that was.
No, it's almost more of a Fantastic Four riff where there is a mission to the moon. It seems like it's an Elon Musk kind of situation.
Or Jeff Bezos. One of your billionaire astronaut rocket ship companies.
And something happened. This is after the mission. Something happened on the mission. They were missing for 7 minutes. And they came back, and it was a big, story, controversy, scandal situation. And the astronauts have been in quarantine. They've been testing them for however long it's been since the mission to find out what happened to them while they were up there. And of course, the main guy, Ramon, who is sort of the main leader of the astronauts, he has now superpowers from the whatever happened to them up there. And it's like, okay, it's a riff on Fantastic Four. That's fine. Like a lot of things are riffs on other things, but I thought this was solid. I didn't love it. But I thought I enjoyed it. I had fun reading it. I thought the art from Marco Licati was really interesting and atmospheric. There was a couple of times where I tripped up on the storytelling.
I was going to comment about that as well.
And the use of the powers was a little confusing as to what actually was happening, but I thought the character work was good. It's a very sort of it's not realistic style, but it is kind of still realistic in a very sort of impressionistic way. I thought it was good. I didn't love it, but I thought it was good.
I don't know that I liked this as much as I wanted to going in, and I had some of the same issues with the pacing and the storytelling that you did. I felt like, the characterization, at least of the main character, to talk like the youth, it felt like it was more vibes than learning about the actual character. Like he was just kind of giving you an attitude rather than like an actual feeling. I think there was one instance where I feel like the art broke the 180 rule. Which is, I don't have your background in cinema and filmmaking, but it just felt like it's like, wait, did the character just switch places?
I mean, the main character was interesting. I thought he was a fun new character. His brother, it's just him and his younger brother. They live in Cleveland. There was,
I believe Ohio has produced more astronauts than any other state.
Interesting.
And the joke, as a person who used to live in Ohio, I can make this joke because sometimes the fastest way to get out of Ohio is to go straight up until you just leave Earth entirely.
So, there's a protest outside the company that ran the mission because they're also like the biggest employer in the state. They sort of run the state, and the cops show up to put it down. But so this guy shows up, and that's when his powers manifest, and he is able to save his brother who's in the middle of the protest. It's all very familiar, but I think the strength of the main character and the art, even if there were problems with it, really kept me interested in what was happening. I'm interested enough to check out the second issue. I don't know, we'll see how it goes. But I thought it was solid. I didn't think it was great, but I thought it was solid.
I truly don't know if I'm interested enough to pick up the second issue. I think it might just depend if it's another light week or not. This is also we talked about this in the Justice League Crisis on Infinite Earth animated brain trust show. This was also one that I was like trying to read on my iPad, and Cal was very interested in like trying to put like, he likes, if I'm like lying on the couch trying to read a book, he likes to like put his head on my chest, directly blocking my view of the iPad, and then be like, what's going on, what are they going to do? And I'm just like, I literally can't tell you because you're blocking my view.
Right.
But he was very interested in trying to read this one with me. And sometimes if it's like a fun light superhero book, I'll try to like read him some of the dialogue. But like in the scene where it's him and his brother, debating the corporate strategy of protesting versus working for the man, I was just like, I don't think you're going to be engaged by this, bud.
Yeah, so a little over your head at the moment. So, yeah, I think this is going to live or die with me with the second issue. So I'll check it out. So that's your answer to your question of whether or not we're sticking with it. I am a yes, and you are a maybe.
Yeah.
And let's do ratings on it. Ratings is out of 5. I'm gonna give it a solid 3.
Yeah, 3. 3 sounds right.
Well, there you go. Patreon.com/iFanboy. Every patron can vote out a book to the rundown. But if you give at a $5 or higher level, you get a patron power live in the show, and Ryan's going to hand one out today.
And this week's patron power goes to someone that I've known for years. I'm very excited to be the one that the power is funneled through, and that is Dayna Doskocil. Dayna and I have corresponded several times over the years, and I actually spoke to her science class. I did like a Skype a Scientist with her students a while back, and I always love doing those things. It's super fun to get to engage with students. This was a pre-COVID Skype a Scientist. We did it just because of the logistical convenience, not because of the world being shut down. So in that vein, Dayna has the amazing, awesome ability to blind people with science.
Ooh, blind them with science. How does that manifest?
I think if she needs to take away someone's sight, and this is like an active power, this is not something that passively happens anytime she sciences at a person, but if she willfully like puts science in front of them, she can use it to blind them.
They just go blind?
Yeah, like if like someone's being annoying and she like quickly scratches out the Krebs cycle on a sheet of paper and goes, "Ha, Krebs cycle!" They're like, I can't see.
Wow.
Yeah.
What happened? So it's a power she has to activate. So it's not like she can't teach science anymore because she'll blind all of her students.
Right. Exactly.
It's not like an area of effect power. It's like she has to actually activate it.
Yeah. She has to use it as a weapon.
Okay, at least that's good for her job. You didn't just make her unemployed.
No, that was not my intention. But I just felt like her ability to funnel science into the ocular nerves of people is so powerful. She can temporarily disable them, and it's a temporary blindness. The sight will come back.
I just want you to know, Dayna, I was looking out for you as when Ryan was trying to take away your income.
I don't think she would agree with that characterization.
Patreon.com/iFanboy. Thanks for being a patron, Dayna. Anyone who gives the $5 or higher level gets a superpower live in the show. And hey, look, it's early. It's early in the show, so we got to do at least one email. Let's see. Justin L. from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, says, Marvel and DC and their readers have been stubborn in that characters don't seem to age or progress through their major life milestones. I would submit that, in order to generate new stories, retcons are a necessary evil. There seem to be only a finite number of stories that are being told. A simple counter argument is that writers could simply write new stories, but it seems their new stories are either not possible, not happening, or not popular. The publishing directive seems to aim to bleed dry all nostalgia and willpower from its aging dedicated readers to cycle back to the stories they remember, but maybe with a new retcon twist. Agree or disagree? Bonus question for which retcons you felt were necessary. I've been thinking about this question since the heated discussion about retcons. I don't remember having a heated discussion about retcons.
I think all our discussions are fire.
I'm not saying we didn't. I just don't remember having one. I assume it's because Josh is constantly confusing retcons and reboots. That's probably why I got heated. That's my guess, because he constantly calls retcons when he means reboots.
And I mean, this question almost, you could reframe it as a reboot versus retcon question as well.
Jeez, Justin. Justin feels very down on everything. Do we agree or disagree that retcons are necessary because new stories can't be told?
I mean, we were just talking about Local Man, Astro City, the Invincible Universe. Like, I mean, maybe, you know,
well,
you have to
outside
create...
of Marvel and DC. He's talking specifically about that shared universe. I don't think it's impossible to tell new stories. I just think they've been telling a lot of them, so it's really difficult. You know, they've been doing these. You know, they've been Batman stories since 1939, and so it's difficult to find a new twist on Batman. It's all in some way an echo of what's come before. That's kind of what happens in serialized storytelling. It's not like soap operas are breaking new ground every week with new stories. It's basically riffs on what's already happened, because it's hard to tell an ongoing story of a character who's been around for 80 years without, you know, going back to what's happened before, telling a variation on it. So in that sense, I agree with Justin that retcons can be necessary to. Well, I don't think retcons are necessary to tell new stories. I think retcons can cause new stories, which is why I think writers probably like them. But I don't think it's
necessary.
Sort of
like, you know about those jellyfish that are functionally immortal because they can return to they can return to their adolescent stage and like grow through adulthood again.
I didn't know about them, but I'll take your word for it.
Yeah, so like it's this type of jellyfish that's able to like, yeah, basically go back to being like a teenage jellyfish and then go through its sexual like maturation over and over again. As far as we know, like it can do this, you know, for forever.
Mm-hmm.
And that's almost what we're talking about here. Like every once in a while, you know, you need to take mid to late 30s married with kids Peter Parker and you need to like morph him back into a teenager somehow and start telling stories of a younger person and their struggles. And I think one of the things that I find that you and Josh, being old men, comment on a lot is that like the writers almost seem to dictate some of that, because as a cohort of writers sort of ages into middle age, I think we see some themes of their lives entering the characters on some level.
100% happens. And they've said it. They've at least admitted it back in the 90s. That's why originally Peter Parker got married in the first place, was because the writers were no longer in their 20s and they wanted to tell stories relevant to their own lives, and they did that. And they chucked how comics work out the window and made a big mess of things. This is why we're in a mess now. And you know, I love everybody making comics. I love. And I'm a big fan of most of the people who are still writing, but they're the same people who've been writing for 20 years and they're 20 years older. You know, they're not kids. You know, comics used to be a place where people in their 20s went and told crazy stories and, you know, showed the world what was possible in the medium. And where Grant Morrison and Garth Ennis and Neil Gaiman came in their 20s, and Garth Ennis was writing Hellblazer when he was 23. You know, like that used to be the thing. And now now it's a lot of guys in their 40s and 50s write these characters still, and so it's hard to be in touch with the fire of youth when you're that age, and you end up sort of gravitating towards stories that make sense to you, which means making the character seem older and
you end up with a local man, a middle-aged superhero comes back to his hometown. You end up with a Avengers Twilight, where it's all the characters are dealing with no longer being relevant. You know, like
right. So again, I think. What Justin is saying is true, that it's hard to tell those stories, but retcons aren't always the way that. I mean, retcons are not always happening. They're relatively rare in the grand scheme of things. And the amount of comics that are coming out, the amount of stories being told, retcons are not always happening, but they can be very helpful. I mean, if he wants his bonus question for retcons were necessary, I don't know that any are necessary, but what would have been good. the Bucky Winter Soldier retcon opened up a whole new vein of really awesome stories, which when it first announced it, I'm not in favor of bringing Bucky back, but they retconned to say that he didn't actually die on the plane. He survived the explosion and was captured by the Soviets and became an assassin, and that opened up all of the Winter Soldier stuff that's happened since then. That was a really good retcon. Hal Jordan, he wasn't really evil. He was possessed by Parallax. Was a great retcon. It saved the character, but but at the same time, it didn't devalue what had come before. It's a hard to thread the needle with a good retcon, but those are two off the top of my head that really worked and opened up a whole new area of storytelling. It's all just storytelling. These guys, comics never stop. They're like the mail. They don't go on hiatus. They got to have a Batman story every month, no matter what. And it's hard. It's hard when there's been 80 years of them through hundreds of titles. And so,
how do you feel about the? How do you feel? I think another one of the more famous retcons is Magneto being Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver's father, because that's been retconned and then de-retconned and then re-retconned.
Right. So making him the father was a retcon, and then making him not the father was a retcon of the retcon. I prefer him as their father, but it was taken away because of the whole fucking Fox. I could pull Perlmutter hating Fox debacle. So I'd love that to be fixed again, because I think they're more interesting characters with him as their dad. I think he's more interesting having these characters as his kids. But it is what it is.
Would you call? I pulled up a couple of lists of like famous retcons, and they're claiming that like the return of Captain America to join the Avengers is a retcon, because they're saying that Cap died at the end of World War II.
Did the comics say he died? I guess if they did, then it's a retcon. Yeah, him being back. Like anytime a character comes back to life. Well, not anytime. That's not true. Not every time. It's not always a retcon.
Would you call the?
Hold on. By the way, we never said what retcon was, in case there's listeners who don't know.
Retroactive continuity.
Right. So the thing it's basically summed up as the thing you thought you knew was true was not. The thing you thought you knew was true was false, and it's a great storytelling tool when done correctly.
Would you agree that the creation of DC's multiverse with the Flash of Two Worlds was a retcon, where previously Jay Garrick was a comic book character that Barry Allen read? And then I guess the retcon there is that like the comic books written on Barry Allen's world were being channeled psychically of the artists and creators.
Technically, I guess, that's a retcon. Yeah.
I think we all know that Carmine Infantino just drew a funny cover, and then they had like a cover of the issue. I mean, I think that's real, right? He just drew a cover of the issue and said, "Deal with that, writer. Make that story make sense," and the multiverse was born. Alan Moore, retconning Swamp Thing into like a forest or the spirit of the green.
Yeah, sometimes there's a difference between a retcon and just a character development.
True, it's a good.
A retcon is this thing has always been that way. You just didn't realize it. Not the character has changed, and I don't know enough about that one to know if that's a retcon or not. But
well, I mean, I think the thing Alan Moore did was I think Alan Moore. I mean, it's a retcon very like straightforwardly in terms of all of us paying attention to Swamp Thing in the late 70s and 80s, we all thought that Swamp Thing was Alec Holland getting caught in like a chemical explosion in a swamp, whereas really the Swamp Thing is like this primordial force.
Yeah, then I guess always existed. That's a retcon, yeah. God, I haven't read those books in forever. It's been like 15 years since I read the Swamp Thing books. Anyway, I love a good retcon when done well, but they're not necessary. They just are a good tool in the toolbox.
And I think we can all agree that our favorite retcon to ever be introduced into comics, and one that we're all glad has persisted into this day and is now returned as a new series, The Sentry.
God. That was a cynical marketing ploy, not a retcon in my book. Let's do Ken J from the Great White North. As seen in Batman 140, there's a plethora of Elseworld Batmans, Batme out there. What are your favorite ones? I wanted to ask you because I feel like you read more Elseworlds than Josh has.
I did read a lot. I really liked Elseworlds growing up. I think The one my head goes to immediately is Russian Batman from Superman Red Son, if only because he's got the fuzzy hat, and I just love that fuzzy hat with a little bat ear sewed onto it. I think it's the greatest thing. But, we recently did the animated version of Gotham by Gaslight, and what was the other one we did? That was the set in the 20s.
Set in the 20s. I don't know anymore.
Gotham by Gaslight is the Jack the Ripper one, and then there was the one we did that was like more steampunky that I can't remember.
Well, that's the thing that happened.
I'll remember.
I'm a big fan of Holy Terror, which was Batman if the U.S. had lost the Revolutionary War and the U.S. remained a colony of England. That was a really good one. That was Alan Grant, Norm Brayfogle. It was definitely Norm Brayfogle. I think that's Alan Grant. They did one where Bruce Wayne got the ring from Abin Sur, not Hal Jordan. I thought that was a really fun one.
Yep.
As you said, the Red Son Batman's terrific. I mean, I love Elseworlds. I love variations on.
It was Batman the Doom that came to Gotham was the one that's technically.
That was an original story, wasn't it? Oh no, it wasn't. That was based on a Mike Mignola story. Oh yeah, I didn't see it. That's why. Anyway, Batman's terrific, and those are my favorites. I think Holy Terror is my favorite one. Because it's I like an Elseworlds where it's all about the little change and it makes a really interesting tale. But at the end of the day, they're still the same person. They're still deep down that same character. That's sort of the Elseworlds that's the best for me. So
I think my favorite's the Russian one, then followed probably by Gotham by Gaslight, and then Bruce Wayne as Green Lantern.
That's a good one. Yeah. Isn't that who did the Green Lantern one? Was that
Mike Barr?
Mike Barr.
Jerry Bingham.
That's right. Jerry Bingham and Mike Barr also did Batman Son of the Demon, which introduced the concept of Damian, which is what Grant Morrison mined for Damian, was where Talia and Bruce have a baby, but she puts that for adoption.
And also, this is a pretty straightforward down the line Elseworlds Batman, but I still think the JLA The Nail is one of the best Elseworlds.
Yeah,
more of a Superman book, but Batman's in it.
Oh, terrific! Alan Davis doing what if Pa Kent got a flat tire and never found Cal. That's the best kind of story. It's just a little tiny thing that changes everything. That's really good. So thanks, Ken, for writing in. Thanks, Justin, for writing. Contact@ifanboy.com is how they wrote in. You can do so too. We've been getting some great emails. Keep them coming. We're making a concerted effort to not skip them, even if we're running long. We thank you for writing. You can also write in for our Media Splode show. Put Media Splode in the subject. And if you're writing within the next week, we're recording Media Splode, I think, in a week's time. And I think we might need some emails for that one because the subject is probably not long enough for an entire episode. But we'll see. But if you have Media Splode episodes, write them in. Media Splode emails, write them in for contact@ifanboy.com. Out now, as Ryan just mentioned, our Crisis on Infinite Earth show, Justice League Crisis on Infinite Earths Part 1. The Animation Brain Trust reviewed that, and that's right behind the show in the feed. You can check that out. It's part one of 3. So I'll be talking about Crisis on Infinite Earths this entire year. And then right behind that show, on the special edition feed, you'd find our Booksplode review of classic G.I. Joe Real American Hero Volume 1, which Josh and I took a look at the first 10 issues of G.I. Joe. Super fun, super G.I. Joey. And as I said before, we're deep in it right now. We're deep in it. Eventually we'll come out of it, but we're deep in it at the moment. And then later this month, as I mentioned, we'll have our Media Splode show. That's going to come out, I think, in 2 weeks. And then at the end of the month, you'll have Josh's Talksplode show. And we'll let you know when we know more about that one as it happens. How's Science Sort of going, Ryan?
I've actually been in discussion with folks of how we're going to resurrect it here in the new year. So we've got some episodes ready, and we're getting ready to record some more. So nothing firm yet, but you can expect more Science Sort of in 2024.
So it's coming back from the dead, from the science dead.
I wouldn't call it dead. It was in stasis. It was in cryosleep, in hibernation, a vegetative state. But
it was on hiatus.
Yeah, it's but not officially, unfortunately. I mean, it's that I always intend to work on it, and then just work and life and all that stuff gets away from me. But I'm not trying to make any excuses. I'm just trying to get some content out there. So I actually wanted to plug another show, if I could, not even one that I'm on.
Sure.
Just because, Connor, I think you might enjoy it. There's this podcast called Newcomers with Nicole Byers and Lauren Lapkus. And they pick each season. They pick like a series of movies that neither of them have never seen because they're not like super geeks about anything really pop culture related. So they did an entire season on the MCU movies. They did an entire Lord of the Rings season. They did an entire Fast and the Furious season. And this current season that I think they're about a third, maybe halfway through, is they're doing all the Batman movies in order, starting with 1966 and working their way up through the Matt Reeves.
So they're not doing the films from the 1940s then?
No, but they do Mask of the Phantasm, and they have a different guest on each week to talk through the movie with them, and it's quite enjoyable.
All right, well, maybe next time they'll be more comprehensive.
Try not to mask your disappointment.
You can find our library of shows. We've got over 1,300 of them and counting. Over at iFanboy.com, you can find all of our shows there, either on the website or on our podcast feed. It's all there. It's a lot of shows if you need something to listen to. You got 1,300 of them. It's a lot. It's a lot to deal with. You can also follow us at iFanboy Comics on Instagram. Find out what the pick of the week is before the show comes out, and also sometimes for the best of the week in panels. And individually, we are CS Kilpatrick on Instagram, J.A. Flanagan on Instagram, Ryan Haupt on Instagram. Are you still Haupt on X?
I mean, I haven't deleted it, but I'm not going to do anything with it. I think literally what I need to do at this point is go post one of those "I'm no longer on this platform" tweets, and then just leave it from there. So.
I think they're called X's
I still
now.
call them tweets.
I think they're called X's
no,
now.
they're not.
I'm pretty sure they're called X's now.
Don't start with me. One thing that folks can do is subscribe on the YouTubes at youtube.com/ifanboy, where you'll find all our old video shows, and we post this show there every week, if that's your preferred format for getting your podcast. Please consider writing us a review or leaving us a star rating on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Thank you, Ryan, for stepping in when Josh had an unexpected work trip.
For sure.
And always enjoy having you on the show. And thank you out there for listening, everyone who listened this week. And until next week, I am Connor.
And I am Ryan. Thanks for having me.